Welcome CISSP candidates to this Masterclass Explainer. Today we're breaking down the absolutely critical frameworks of security assessment, testing, and auditing. I'm going to be your instructor, guiding you through these concepts, and we'll be relying heavily on visual structures and frameworks to really lock this knowledge into your brain. Look, designing a robust security assessment and testing program is a cornerstone maintenance activity for literally any information security team. And mastering these concepts, well, it's absolutely essential for crushing your exam.
Here is our agenda. 1. Assessments, tests, and audits. 2. Audits and SOC reports. 3. Conducting vulnerability scans. 4. The penetration testing process. 5. Software security testing methods. And 6. Security management and oversight. Today's syllabus maps directly to Domain 6 and Domain 8 objectives. We're going to move systematically from program design and audits right down into the specific technical tests, and then we'll wrap up with software security and management oversight. This structure is perfectly designed to get your mindset right for the exam.
Section 1, Assessments, Tests, and Audits. Okay, let's dive right in and establish the absolute core definitions you need to pass.
So our very first critical definition is security testing. This is all about verifying that a control is actually functioning properly. You are actively verifying a mechanism through automated scans, tool-assisted penetration tests, or even just manual attempts. Now compare that to a security assessment. Assessments are way broader. They're comprehensive risk reviews of a system or application. Yeah, they usually include testing tools, but they go much further by reviewing the overall threat environment and actually offering specific remediation recommendations back to management.
Now notice the stark contrast between internal tests and formal audits. This distinction is crucial. Internal tests are meant for internal use only. It's about finding potential improvements. But the staff who design and implement these controls, they have an inherent conflict of interest. Audits, however, are performed to demonstrate control effectiveness to a third party, like regulators or a board of directors. So here is a CISSP exam mindset note for you. The key distinction for an audit is independence. You literally cannot audit your own work. The exam will definitely try to trick you by having an internal team perform an audit on their own systems. But remember, that is just a test or an assessment, not a true formal audit.
Section 2, Audits and SOC reports. Let's see how all this builds into formal reporting frameworks. When you need to formally prove your security posture to customers or regulators without conducting multiple redundant third-party audits, you turn to Service Organization Control, or SOC audits. You absolutely must memorize these 3 SOC engagements for the exam. Under the SSAE 18 standard, SOC 1 focuses strictly on controls that might impact the accuracy of financial reporting. Just think money. SOC 2 evaluates controls affecting security, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and privacy. But the results are highly detailed and confidential, usually only shared under a non-disclosure agreement. And SOC 3? It covers the exact same security and privacy criteria as SOC 2, but it is a summarized report intended for public disclosure.
In addition to those 3 categories, there are 2 types of SOC reports, and the difference is huge. A Type 1 report provides the auditor's opinion on the suitability of the design of the controls at a specific point in time. It's essentially just a documentation review. A Type 2 report, however, goes much further. It provides the auditor's opinion on the actual operating effectiveness of those controls over an extended period of time, at least 6 months. So the crucial takeaway here is that Type 2 is much more reliable. Auditors aren't just reading the paperwork, they're verifying the controls actually function in the real world.
Time for another CSSP exam mindset note. A classic test trap is confusing the categories with the types, specifically mixing up a SOC 2 Type I with a SOC 2 Type 2. If the exam question asks for a report to prove to a client that your security controls have been operating effectively over the last year, you need a SOC 2 Type 2. Remember, Type I is just design, Type 2 is operational effectiveness over time. Do not get those crossed.
Section 3, Conducting Vulnerability Scans. Moving away from the auditing frameworks down to technical controls, let's explore vulnerability scanning.
Vulnerability scanning automatically probes your systems for known weaknesses. These scans fall into 4 main categories: network discovery, network vulnerability, web application, and database. Now, a really critical concept here is how you run them. By default, most scanners run unauthenticated, meaning they act just like an outside attacker without any special privileges. But if you run authenticated scans, where you actually give the scanner read-only access to the system, it allows it to read configuration information directly. This is a game changer. It greatly reduces false positives, where the scanner reports a vulnerability that isn't really there, and false negatives, where it entirely misses a dangerous flaw.
Think about a standard network discovery scan using an industry-standard tool like Nmap. What you're doing is identifying specific open TCP ports. You might see port 22 open for SSH or port 443 open for HTTPS. It tells you exactly what services are exposed. But hold on, here is a major CISSP exam mindset note. Never, ever scan a network without explicit, preferably written permission. From a legal threshold perspective, some jurisdictions actually consider unauthorized scanning a direct violation of computer abuse laws. Always establish your authorization first.
Taking it to the next step, a network vulnerability scan using a tool like Nessus actively probes those open ports against a massive database of known flaws. You might find it identifying some specific low-risk SSH vulnerabilities. However, you've got to be aware of the scanner's limitations. Standard automated scans generally cannot detect zero-day vulnerabilities. If the flaw hasn't been identified by the scanner vendor yet, the tool is going to miss it.
Section 4. The penetration testing process. Now we step beyond passive scanning into active exploitation. This is the realm of the penetration test, where you actually attempt to defeat security controls. The NIST framework outlines this process in 4 distinct phases. It begins, crucially, with planning. This is where you establish the rules of engagement, scope, and get that explicit management authorization. Next up is discovery, which is a combo of manual reconnaissance and automated scanning. Then comes the attack phase, where testers actively exploit the system using tools like Metasploit. And finally, reporting, which summarizes the results and provides your remediation recommendations. Now, testers operate with varying levels of knowledge about their target. A white box test provides full knowledge of the environment. This saves a massive amount of time because you bypass all that early reconnaissance. A black box test, conversely, provides absolutely zero prior knowledge. It realistically simulates a blind external hacker trying to gain access from scratch in an entirely unknown environment. And right in the middle, you have a gray box test, offering partial knowledge to balance cost and realism.
CSSP exam mindset note. Never conflate vulnerability scanning with penetration testing. It is such a common pitfall. Vulnerability scans only probe and detect. Penetration tests actively attempt to defeat and bypass security controls. Because of this active exploitation, pen tests can easily disrupt system access, corrupt data, or even crash your servers. That is exactly why establishing the rules of engagement in the planning phase is so incredibly vital.
Section 5. Software Security Testing Methods. Let's shift our focus slightly over to Domain 8's principles.
We need to ensure the software itself is secure through rigorous code review and testing before it ever hits a production environment. Understanding the difference between SAST and DAST is a foundational software security concept here. Static Application Security Testing, or SAST, analyzes the source code at rest. It evaluates the security of the software without actually running it, usually via automated tools, looking for common flaws like buffer overflows. Dynamic Application Security Testing, or DAST, evaluates security while the application is actively running in a runtime environment. DAST is often your only option when you deploy third-party applications where you don't have access to the underlying source code. It often utilizes synthetic transactions, which are scripted transactions with known expected results, to verify performance and security in runtime.
One highly specialized dynamic testing technique is fuzz testing. Look, software should never depend on users behaving properly. It must gracefully handle unexpected activity. Fuzzing actively supplies invalid, unexpected, or totally random input to the software just to stress its limits. Testers then monitor the application, watching for software crashes, buffer overflows, or unpredictable outcomes that would indicate a vulnerability.
It's really interesting how we categorize fuzzing techniques. Mutation fuzzing is often called dumb fuzzing. It simply takes previous valid inputs and randomly alters them, like blindly appending strings or changing characters around. Generational fuzzing, on the other hand, is intelligent. It actually develops data models and creates entirely new, specially crafted input based on a deep understanding of the application's underlying data structures and protocols. CSSP exam mindset note. Make sure you know the difference between dumb mutation fuzzing and intelligent generational fuzzing for the exam.
Section 6. Security Management and Oversight. Finally, let's tie all of this technical testing and auditing back to management.
You simply cannot maintain a secure environment or deter insider threats without management actively reviewing the data. One of the most critical management processes is the account review, especially for highly privileged users. To conduct this properly, management must extract the actual list of users with privileged access directly from the system, retrieve the officially authorized privilege matrix from the approval authority, and systematically compare the two. This ensures access strictly matches authorization and catches unauthorized modifications or terminated employees who somehow still have active accounts. If an organization is too massive for a full review, they have to use random sampling, ensuring the sample is truly random, of course, to avoid missing entire categories of errors.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought regarding the principle of ethical disclosure. When you're conducting security testing and you discover a zero-day vulnerability in a third-party vendor's code, you absolutely have a responsibility to report it privately to the vendor first. You must give them a reasonable amount of time to develop a patch. But as a risk manager, you have to ask yourself, what happens to the global risk landscape when that clock runs out? If the vendor ignores the flaw, the ethical disclosure principle suggests you must publicly disclose the vulnerability so other security professionals can protect their own networks. It's a really delicate balance of due diligence, ethics, and systemic risk. Thank you so much for joining this Masterclass Explainer, and good luck with your CSSP preparation.